Hey, good afternoon, and welcome to today's episode of Boss Talk. Today we're going to talk about a automatic fire alarm that turned into a box alarm on Robey Road. I'm Battalion Chief Mark Davis. Pleased to be here live today from Station 15. As always, if you're a certified chief officer wishing to receive COPDI credit, make sure that you sign in now on the YouTube chat with your name and fire service ID, and then do the same thing at the end of the episode as well. So today we're talking about a automatic fire alarm call at a large independent living facility. The important part about that is it's a large wood frame structure, one of the newer types in Company 15's area. Crews were on the scene, it upgraded to a box alarm, and a bunch of stuff happened. So we have some folks here today to talk about that, and I'll let them introduce themselves. A couple things. Well, actually, what will come out of that, there's going to be a lot of good discussions there. One will be about the large wood frame structures that we see, mainly residential, right? But they're populating in a lot of areas throughout the county. And this was a fire in the void space, which is one of our more concerning events. So we hope to have good discussion about that. Also, it was a newer building. There'll be some discussion about maps and mapping and technology, kind of. And right, one of our difficulties is our maps and how they're done and who gets them and how they're distributed. And while we work to try to make that a squeaky clean process, it can be not so in certain times. So that we expect to talk about that some. If you were working or volunteering on the 14th or the 17th of May, then you encountered the EMS surge. And some crazy stuff happened on those days. If you put up the first slide for me. So, right, there were a lot of calls. Unusual surge in EMS demand on both the 14th and the 17th. And a number of factors came into play. But the bottom line is, right, there was just a lot of demand for EMS services. So between folks' wait time a little bit at the hospital and people just calling 911, we encountered a really high demand for service. If you go to the graph next. So the blue shows kind of what happened that day, and the red line is what they had been seeing over time historically, meaning past. The blue is that day, and you can see that there was a big spike in that time period on the day that this graph is referencing. And that was very unusual for us. You talk about standard deviations and those kind of things. This was right 2 standard deviations kind of outside the average on that. So a couple things happening. You may or may not have learned about or see that some additional units, ready reserve units, are being put in place so that we can quickly switch over and get those units up and running. I worked yesterday. Yesterday, ambulance 719 kind of came into play, so it's sitting at 19 station. The ability to quickly switch it out or switch crews out, get a crew there to staff that thing, and so forth. What you should expect in the next 7 to 10 days would be some discussion with your battalion chief, who is going to come around and talk about a little bit about what happened on those 2 days, and some discussion about how these matters will be addressed moving forward. Probably the most important thing, if you think this is a moving target, right? Any given day, we got pieces all over the place in the county. So just because you have a couple ready reserves in a few houses doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be that house that grabs that ready reserve. The more important thing is, though, that the ready reserve is ready when the time is needed for the surge. One more thing, and this is another current event, right? We try to talk about a current event, right? Two's incident, right? Engine 702 on the C shift over on 12th Avenue in Prince George's County, right? They encountered a patient with a gun on an EMS call. And fortunately, everybody got out of that incident unharmed, and, between the patient and the crews and the police. Could not emphasize enough the nature of many of the calls we go to, the opportunity for violence to occur, right? We want folks to be good about thinking about a path of egress every time you go into any occupancy, right? For a fire call, we often think about, hey, how am I going to get out if this place is on fire? On an EMS call, right, you got to think about, how am I going to get out? Somebody needs to look out, right? I understand if you're on an EMS unit by yourself with 2 people, it's a little more difficult. We got an engine company in there. Somebody's job is just situational awareness. So fortunately, that all worked out okay. Pretty sure there was some tense moments. Patient woke up, reached for a fire alarm, and things went to heck in a handbasket there. Everybody did a good job on that, so there may be some more follow-up that comes out. But again, can't emphasize enough situation awareness. So that's it for me. I'd like to move on to the Roby Road incident. I'm going to introduce Captain Brady Miller. He's going to be our moderator. He'll introduce our 3 other folks that are going to participate in today's Boss Talk about fire in the void space, a large, lightweight, assisted living facility. Captain Miller.
Chief, thank you. So I really kind of want to start out with the basics of this. This is a call that was literally 3 or 4 blocks from the firehouse, mid-morning on a weekend. So a lot of people on the roads, things like that. And then this morning when I was getting ready, I was thinking about this building and kind of running through all the different firehouses that, obviously I've worked at in everybody's area. And I think these things are literally everywhere. So while we're talking about this today, I want you to think about, the building in your area that's really a lot like this, and have that discussion, maybe after the program, maybe at dinner time or whatever. What are we going to do? What's our plan to address this common situation, this common building? So let me start out first by introducing everybody. Chief Dempsey from Wheaton has been with us a couple of times before, brings a vast amount of knowledge on this topic, and will interject as we go along. And then on this side of the table, we have Lieutenant Aaron Hykes, Battalion 5 on the A shift, and Lieutenant Ryan Travers, Battalion 1 on the A shift. So first and foremost, let's kind of lay the background of the event. Lieutenant Aaron, if you would just...
Yeah, so I was assigned to the truck that day. Myself and Jason Everly was driving me. Kenny Vines was my tillerman. Got hit out for the automatic alarm. Going out the door, Kenny looked at me and said, "Hey, we putting everything on?" I said, "Yes." Kind of scoffed a little bit, senior man, junior lieutenant.
Certainly.
I get it. I had some issues with gear or whatever happened. Got out late, so we were a little bit behind the engine. Jason and I were talking in the front. He said, "This is a newer building. If you look to the front of the map book, there's a pre-plan for it." And at that time was just a hand-drawn, generic pre-plan map with the distances. And he was explaining a little bit about the building, where the connections were, what hydrant the engine would use, basically what they had, worked out prior to this call. Got on scene. Engine was already inside. Nothing evident from any vantage point we could see. I put the rest of my stuff on, went inside, talking to Brett Carter, was standing by the alarm panel, asked him what the alarm panel had said. He said smoke detector, 3rd floor. I was still waiting on Kenny to come in the building. About the same time, that's when Ryan said fill the box, that he had smoke on the 2nd and 3rd floor. Kind of got tunnel vision, said fire, fire, fire. So I kind of just took off, broke crew integrity, left Kenny wherever Kenny was at. At that point, I didn't know.
Okay.
Took the center stairwell, got to the 2nd floor, came out, and it looked like this. I mean, it was completely clear. I had no idea that Ryan was in the back stairwell. What is it, the Charlie stairwell or something?
I can't remember the stairwell number, but yeah, that far back stairwell.
Yeah. So proceeded to the 3rd floor, encountered a couple residents, told them, "Hey, get out the building." Of course, they were nerved up because the fire alarm was going off, and I'm telling them, "Hey, the building's on fire." Directed them basically where to go. Hey, continue down this stairwell, out the front door, hang out in the parking lot, or go to your car or whatever. Got to the 3rd floor, encountered the same thing. No smoke, no evidence of fire. Looked to my left and realized that the building had dead-ended on that side. So I decided to make a right. Encountered another resident that said smoke back there, smoke back there. Told him, "Hey, get out." Turned the corner, and it was like a light haze. Got to the end of the hallway, and the apartment just before the stairwell, I saw the door was cracked open. So I kicked that door open, went in, searched it, came out. No smoke at all in there. It was clear, but we had pretty good
smoke in the hallways, not
pretty good haze on the in the hallway. Nothing in the apartment. Kenny met up with me. I had a thermal imager. He said, "What do you want to do? You want to start taking doors?" I said, "Hold on a second." I scanned each of the doors with a thermal. I said, "Hey, man, there's no heat. We're not going to start taking doors. I don't think we got anybody trapped. The fire in here." Ryan came out of the stairwell. I said, "Hey, where's it at?" He said, I don't know. I can't find it." I said, "Well, I think it's below us. Let's drop down a floor and check that out."
What'd the alarm show when you got there?
Just smoke detector, third floor.
Smoke detector, third
Yeah,
floor.
that's all.
Well, it gave a room number. It was like 3, whatever the back far apartment is.
Yeah.
It was that hallway smoke. So
Yeah, so we proceeded down the steps. We hit the second floor landing. It's like when we could start to feel the heat a little bit. Like that area was warmer than the rest of the building. And just
Smoke to the point where you were wearing an SCBA?
Oh
or-
yeah.
Okay.
It was like a pretty good haze, and then when he opened the stairwell door, of course, obviously it got a little worse.
Okay.
I put on my face piece, started to breathe air, and we went through that stairwell door. It was lights out.
Okay.
I mean, we started down to the second floor landing, and my flashlight maybe 3 feet in front of me.
Okay.
And when we hit that second floor landing, I said, "Hold up a second." And I took the thermal imager and I just started scanning the walls. And when I hit that interior wall in the landing, it basically just lit up white. And
So-
he proceeded to go to the second floor, and I popped a hole in a drywall and I said, "Hey, Ryan, I found it."
Okay.
And that's kind of where we...
I'm going to go back just a little bit and really kind of talk about you being a lieutenant, a float lieutenant. And you're, a 1st Battalion. You were a 1st Battalion firefighter. Have you worked at Burtonsville a lot?
I did my rookie time here.
Okay.
But
not
outside
since
of
being
that,
an officer.
no.
Okay.
That was the first shift that I've been back here since.
So first shift, 11 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
Were you able to pull up the pre-plan in the map book?
Just
Or
that-
the MDC?
No, just
Or-
that hand-drawn one that I had noticed, because that's
Okay.
my thing in the morning. Whatever
So all
piece
of
I'm
your
riding,
information came from
from Jason Everly
Jason
sitting there
Everly,
driving me to the car.
has worked here
Yep.
a good number of years
Yep.
now. So you're heavily relying on
Yeah.
his information as a float lieutenant.
I knew where Roby
100%.
Road was, but I was like, I don't know this
Okay.
building. Like,
And the travel time was 2 minutes tops?
maybe.
Maybe
Yeah.
2 minutes. Okay. All right, cool. And we're going to come back. Ryan, so you are currently parked here,
correct.
right? So you've been parked here for how long?
A few months or so, 3 or 4 months probably.
Okay. So have you run that been in that building before?
I have.
And what about the map? Were you aware of?
Yeah, so that building, obviously a few years old kind of thing, and we had been out there before to do walkthroughs, and we run, EMS calls and fire alarms there, and we had been out before, did some walkthroughs, and I know that previous to, they were working on, some of the guys from the shift had been working on doing a map, a specific box plan for that map.
So the map, it was in progress, essentially.
Right.
Okay. You'd
but
been there.
nothing had
only
been-
there because
We had been
Your
there, we've been
apartment.
there, yep, and we had been there, walked through it, just same thing, kind of a high hazard building, hey, this is kind of unique. And
run some lines in there, stuff like that.
so
or-
I didn't specifically, but I know some of the other shifts did and got numbers as far as, I think actually one of the detail ones in front of that map book have a number for every single apartment and what the stretches are.
Okay.
Based off.
So
of
good map.
Using, yeah. So, and then there was, the detail page and that kind of thing. So, it's a good map, tells you what is where, but it was good that I had been out there before. Just I walked through the building, know where things were. It was kind of an odd setup, long hallways.
Did you have did you have an option to look it up in the map book, or do you use the MDC or a combination, or is it in the MDC? The building itself?
So again, a little bit unique with that one is I typically always use, my initial go-to is always the map book. So specifically that day, I knew previously there was not a map page for that. Knowing the building, well, I still kind of flipped through that. Well, I flipped through it and actually the box map was in there. So I want to say that about a week prior to that was actually when that box map went in service into the map books just here.
Okay.
So, and again, we'll probably
When you say
touch on
just
this.
here, what do you mean?
So, specifically talking to some of the other companies, come to find out, none of the other companies around us
Yeah.
had a map page for that. And on top of that, for those that use the MDC, the MDC had not been updated. So via the MDC, that building did not exist. And in most people's map books in this battalion or anywhere, that building did not exist.
And certainly here in 15's area, where you're running with Howard County, you're running with Prince George's County,
Yep.
We don't have a good standard way of distributing maps.
Yep.
It's just, it is what it is.
So, and again, after that event, it was, kind of made a priority, like, hey, this map needs to go out kind of thing. And even I know that the MDC is now updated, that the building's in the MDC. But again, that was on the day of that event.
Yeah.
That was not there.
So
and
just another challenge we face as an organization, really.
Yep.
So did you have time to look it up between here and Roby Road? I mean,
I did.
okay.
Yep.
And the person driving you was regularly assigned here?
Yep. Master Firefighter Carter.
Okay.
Yep.
So long time master fireman here.
Yep.
And was he feeding, what kind of information was he feeding you solid information, or did it just all kind of happen so fast that exchange?
I don't think there was a whole lot of exchange. Kind of, we knew where it was, and
Okay.
other than that, I don't think there really
But
was a whole lot
regular
of exchange.
building,
Yep.
own hydrant, connections,
Yep.
pretty standard.
Yeah, there's
Okay.
hydrant connections right out front by the front door, pretty much on the Alpha Bravo.
Do we
corner.
have we, and I'm sorry, I haven't been watching the camera. Were we putting the maps up?
There was a couple of, yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
But going in, you knew you had no standpipes. With or
that?
without the map.
Oh, yes.
You knew you
Yep.
didn't have standpipes.
So
sir.
unstand pipe,
Sprinklered,
unstand pipe.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we got a picture of the front of the building or overhead or Google Map, whatever you want to put up. I don't care. What was your game plan when you got there? Automatic fire alarm. Are you running a hand line anywhere? Are you having a guy stand by? What's
No,
your
for
kind
that
of-
was, I mean,
Lieutenant Travers is.
we get dressed like every other call for fire alarms.
All right,
and
so now we're there. What are we doing
So-
when we're there?
we're there, and I grabbed the bar out of the front like I normally do for most of
about
the
the guys
events,
in
and
the
the
back?
guys in the back both grabbed racks, and we kind of went inside.
Okay, so we're taking some racks in.
Yep.
All right.
So
And the panel said.
made in the front
fire-
door. Panel said smoke apartment or 3 whatever. It was like the back far apartment, whatever the farthest apartment was. It said smoke detector, whatever.
Obviously.
But typically from discussions before from the fellows at Company 15 is we use that center stairwell. A lot of the numbers that they had done is based off of that kind of thing. So you use that center stairwell we're going in. Well,
And we're looking at a map now. So the center in the
So
front
basically,
door,
if you
up the
go
center
in-
stairwell and left
Yep,
or right.
so you'll see it if you pretty much walk in that front door
Yeah.
where it says that's that center stairwell. So there's 3, one on in a sense on each wing, but
and this is
that was
really
the
no
game.
different than any of the buildings that, whether it be Rockville or Wheaton or
Yep.
Clarksburg, that are all kind of
Yeah.
the same.
So when it's at 3rd floor, my initial thing was we'll walk in the door and go up the stairwell we normally do and go to the 3rd floor. Well,
Okay.
coincidentally that day, which I look back on a little bit, there was a few more people than you typically see come out on fire alarms, but again, that's whatever. So once there was that many people, I was like, well, let's walk around to the other stair, where the apartment was anyway, which I think now that you have it up, I think it was 327 was the apartment. But anyhow, so we walked around, and the panel says 327, and we walk around to that far back corridor, and we hit the back, and there's a haze.
On floor 1 or floor 3?
Floor 1.
Okay. So your plan was go floor 1, then up to 3.
We're just going to go around. Yep.
Okay.
Where the front stairwell was kind of busy. So once we made it around to that back corridor, there was a haze on the 1st floor. And we
But just a light haze. You weren't.
yeah,
burning
like
it.
it was like
Okay.
a light haze, and we kind of made a joke to the guys like, if it's joints on, or if it's a haze down here and the detector's up there, that joint's on fire. Well then we get in the stairwell and it banks down a little bit, and by the time we get to the 2nd floor, it was banked down pretty good.
Okay, so so you get into a stairwell, you got smoke,
Yep.
you go on air. What's our game plan from there? Like, we're going to put these racks in service. What's the plan?
So what we did was once we went in that stairwell and we got to the 2nd floor, we realized conditions were changing pretty quick. So we popped out onto the 2nd floor. Again, same kind of hazy as it was on the 1st floor. So I told, the fellas in the back, I said, hey, look, we got to call for some help. Let's work together. And I told the two fellows in the back, let's work together to get a line. My initial game plan was a line through the front door like we had talked about previous to, and then we'll build out the line from there.
Were the risers in the connections in the stairwell or within the hallway?
For
The standpipe.
there is no standpipe.
Oh, no standpipe.
Yep. So no standpipe. Yep. Yep.
The
Okay.
answer is
So
no and no.
initially, yeah.
No and no.
That's an easy one.
So again, initially it was like, hey, that's, my game plan through my head was, hey, let's work
Run a
towards the
long
front
line.
door that we're going to run a long line.
Okay, so did you send those guys, like, you went on air, you called for the box alarm? You
I called
sent
for
them
the
back?
I
or
called
how
for the
was-
box. I sent them two back. I said, I'm going to go figure out where the fire is, kind of meet me back here. So
Put a
I
line
went
in service.
Yep. So I went back into the stairwell, again, went to the third floor,
And that's where you saw
zero.
Aaron?
Yep. So he was popping out of the apartment when I went upstairs.
So when you guys met each other, essentially, hey, I'm working on a long line, I'm working on a hand line, I filled the box, we're going to
Yep.
sort out where the fire is.
But again, like with that one was, hey, I'm going to have my own hydrant connections on the alpha side, which is my intention of what it was. Well, come to find out, when Brett had heard me call for the box alarm, he actually moved down to the other hydrant to be able, knowing that we were in the back stairwell, he actually moved the engine company down to the other hydrant.
So closer to where you're...
So if you want to put
Yeah, put the map up,
that group back up.
if you would, please.
The one, yeah, there we go. So basically, that that Alpha Bravo corner was the one that I called out with the connections, at least on the radio, and then Master Firefighter Carter had ended up taking and drove down to that hydrant that was on the Alpha Delta corner, and actually ran the 400 by himself around the building. And again, you can probably show a picture. I think I took some pictures of that courtyard, but it's not a level courtyard by any means. It's kind of up and down and runs through that back. So he ran, this is kind of looking into the courtyard from that Delta side, and he ran that back across to the Charlie side. And when we realized that he had already moved the wagon, all we did was transition from extending the racks inside the building to flip it and extend the racks to the outside of the building.
So how long of a line did you end up putting in service?
600 foot.
600 foot. Any
Yep.
challenges with that?
I think mainly was the manpower of putting it in service.
Meaning it
But
took
I kinda-
those three guys.
Right. It took those, well, really plus some, because I know that I called, I got her company 12 mark up, and I said,
Yeah.
hey, can you just make sure that when you guys get here, just focus on helping
Running
the
a
driver
400 for a
get
driver is a very
Right.
challenging thing to
right.
do.
So
It's not a simple, fast.
absolutely, and even with that, it wasn't a straight across the parking lot kind of deal. It was
Okay. So you meet on the third floor, you go back down to the second. Aaron breaches a wall, fire's there. Was the hand line in place when that happened?
no, and even I know when we came,
the steps at that point.
yeah, we had when Steven had come in from the back, he had even seen it. When we came back in, he said, hey, I think I saw it, because he actually saw some fire coming out from where the treads
From
were.
the outside.
From the inside when he came back up the stair, because again we were thinking it was somewhere between the second and third floor on that kind of thing. So like you see on that picture, so that's the second floor going up, basically.
Okay.
That going up to the second floor there.
Okay.
So when he came
you breached
back
the hole like that, Aaron? Like
Yeah.
from the underside.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, from the underside.
From the
of the
underside,
Yeah.
right. So when Steven came back around to come up to meet me where we met last, basically, he's like, I saw fire come out of those treads.
Okay.
Just a little bit of
Conditions in the stairwell. Aaron said it was,
pretty little visibility.
low to no visibility.
Yep.
When we breached the drywall, found the fire, how long was it until, we got a lot of the drywall removed and the fire was out?
I mean, really, there was a hole in the drywall, the fire then exposed itself, and then, 5 gallons of water and the fire was out.
Yeah.
And about that time was when the sprinkler head popped on the second floor. There was
In the stairwell.
In the stairwell, yep.
Okay.
So
So there was some heat, obviously.
Well, actually, Brett said, hey, I'm charging the system. And about that time is when the sprinkler head let loose.
Okay.
So,
Mm-hmm.
Did that sprinkler head have any effect on any of the fire?
it was actually on the landing
yeah.
of the second floor. So really, this is where this picture is that they have up now.
Uh-huh.
So that's on in between the floors. So that where that actually ended up popping was on the second floor.
So fire came out of that space.
This
caused
space,
that
right.
Activation.
But eventually, right, and that heat that popped the one on the second floor on the riser right there on the landing.
Okay.
So
Generally speaking, no real, light smoke in the hallways, on the occupied floors, in the stairwell, it was the bulk of the smoke.
Yep.
So you had a good idea that's where the fire was. We just had to figure out how to get to it.
Correct.
Okay. Anything that, what about occupants? What did we do with occupants? Was it a shelter in place? Was it I know that, Aaron, you said, hey, leave the building.
Whatever I encountered making my way to that stairwell, I just told them to get out.
Okay.
Once we kind of had our heads around what was going on, I think the chief had shown up at that point. We decided we were going to shelter in place. We did check the apartments on our way to that stairwell, in the vicinity.
And the adjacent apartments to the stairwell all were negatives.
Yeah, negative.
Little to no smoke in them?
Zero.
Okay, so life safety concern wasn't it's obviously high, but was low. Let's get the fire out. That it makes the life safety. Okay, anything that you guys want to add? Look, 'cause I'm really curious to get to the chief.
So what did we determine the cause of the fire was?
Said a cigarette they were smoking in the stairwell. They had it on. They had somebody on camera. There's cameras in the stairwell, and they had him sitting there, and it had set a cigarette on one of the treads, and it had burned through. I guess over obviously some time, but
So you had some fire in the stairs, and some fire in the void space.
so when we initially, so basically the one, I think it was the previous picture you had up. If you want to put that one back up, the one where you showed that. So that was the stair going up, and then if you have the picture that's underneath the stair. Yep, there you go. So basically, you can see where that previous picture was. It burned from the top side, and then the fire just kind of ran that channel on the
Bulk
other
of
side.
fire, though, was underneath, not on top.
Underneath, correct.
Okay.
Yep. So the little bit of fire that was exposed, I'll call it, that they saw initially was just a small little fire that they saw coming out of that tread, and then obviously it was exposed when we opened up that drywall underneath.
Do you have any idea, not that I really expect you to know the answer, how long, when somebody might have put that cigarette there?
I will
And this might be
divulge
really more
that information. I know that, I know when FEI came out, they had cameras of knowing when that individual was in
But
the
was it an
stairwell.
hour? Was it, do we know?
I have no idea.
We weren't privy to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because I'd just be curious when
Yeah.
when the guy was.
I know initially
versus when the fire
they were
department
100% sure that this was arson, and they had called for arson dogs kind of deal. And then once they quickly realized it was cameras,
There's a lot of stairwells that
hey,
smell
there
like
was-
cigarettes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that quickly moved to, hey, we have a camera and
Okay.
this, and put it all together, and it was.
So thank you guys. So Chief, I'm going to kind of turn to you, and remember, if you guys have questions, it is the talk and the chat is being moderated. Chief Davis is monitoring it. Feel free to type your question in, and we'll address it. So tell us a little bit before we really get into this, your background and where your area of expertise is here.
All right, so I'm Chief 742, but my paying job is licensed fire protection engineer, and this is what I do. I design systems, inspect systems, consult on systems, fire protection, whether it be fire alarms, sprinklers, standpipes. An important note in this case, we had a map issue. We had units coming that weren't going to be familiar with the building. A good rule of thumb is if it's 4 stories or more, it's going to have a standpipe, probably. Less than 4 stories, doubtful going to have a standpipe. That's a good rule of thumb, but of course, check the stairs because there's always exceptions.
Yeah.
Without the standpipe, we're behind the 8 ball right away. And, running that line is going to take time. Time is fire growth.
Yeah. But outside of that general rule of thumb, I as an officer in Tacoma Park can't go, hey, there's a new 4-story building. I know there's going to be a standpipe in there.
Not necessarily. The code has changed along the way as to how they measure the height. Usually it's 4 stories, but there are 4-story buildings that don't get standpipes.
Okay.
The only way to really know is to, try to visit the building while it's being constructed.
Yeah. Is any of this story odd to you?
No, you're not really. We encounter three types of sprinkler systems. NFPA 13D is governed towards single-family houses or townhouses. NFPA 13R is residential system. It's pretty much apartment buildings that are 4 stories or less in height. This building is fairly big, so it wouldn't surprise me if this building was an NFPA 13 system, a full system. The big difference is, and I don't know if the guys had time to load it up, when the code was trying to codes were trying to develop.
I don't.
Yes.
Okay.
So when the codes were trying to develop a sprinkler system for residential occupancies, they knew they couldn't go the full NFPA 13 route because the industry would push back. The construction industry would push back and say that's too expensive. So they pretty much took fire data that had been collected over about 10 years, and from that fire data, they looked at civilian deaths and civilian injuries. And they said, okay, we're going to try to cover like 90%. So if you look at this chart, you'll see civilian deaths and civilian injuries, and pretty much where everything's about 1% and down, those areas do not get protection. And it's kind of proven itself to have worked. Now, what we have had...
So I'm looking at that, and I'm looking at closets. I guess, is that from dining room down? Is that what we're looking at that doesn't have fire protection?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much, with a few exceptions along the way. But, this was like a compromise. The idea being we're putting these systems in for the protection of life, a life safety system. If everybody gets out of the building and we burn the building to the ground,
who cares?
That's considered a success.
Yeah, very much.
And we've had those. I investigated a fire in Midlothian, Virginia, some years ago, and it was before the code was in place, and they'd kind of negotiated something, and this place burned to the ground. There were no injuries. It was considered a success.
Yeah.
In this case, we had a fire in a void space. There are, in an NFPA 13 system, which is also designed for property protection, you do have some concealed void spaces that are not going to be sprinklered. There are options in the code where you can provide fire stopping, you can fill it with insulation. So sometimes an NFPA 13 system does have void spaces that can give us problems.
But nothing on the outside of the building that's an indicator to me that,
no.
Hey,
No.
there's fire protection underneath the stairs.
No, and one of our biggest concerns, of course, is the fire getting in an attic that's unprotected. Our ladder truck access is compromised. Getting up there to put the fire out is compromised. The only way you're really going to know is to visit the facility really while it's being built.
Yeah.
Once that drywall goes up, once those contractors are gone, it's a little bit difficult to necessarily tell for sure whether it's a 13R system or a 13 system. Now, if you go to the riser, there could be some telltales there. There's supposed to be signage at the riser that says how it was calculated and should say whether it's an NFPA 13R or an FPA 13 system.
But would you think that it's viable for the lieutenant to know that information? I mean, I didn't know that, and I've been in the fire department for a long time. So
there's a lot of things in the code that are supposed to be fireman friendly that unfortunately they don't make it down to the fireman.
yeah,
I'm in a different position than everybody because I do this for a living. So I know these things just because I do it for a living. But getting that down to the base fireman, fire officer, we haven't done such a great job with that. But it's things like this we're doing today that can help along the way.
Yeah.
Station 5 has 2 buildings that from the outside look identical. They're both buildings built for the aged. One of them is completely non-combustible. The other one is wood construction, but a full sprinkler system. From the outside, there's no way you would ever know that.
Yeah.
You would never know unless you saw it being built. you would not know that it's combustible construction.
Really highlighting the importance of
Yes.
get out
Hey,
there, even on EMS runs,
Yeah.
right? You've been in that building a
Pay it.
dozen plus times on EMS call.
Pay attention when it's going up.
Yeah.
That's the great time to get in there and see the features it's going to have, see where the fire breaks are going to be, if they're even there. So one of the big things that the code does is an NFPA 13R system allows you to build one extra story based on the construction type. An NFPA 13 system allows you to build one extra story and build it 200% bigger. So a fully sprinklered building will be typically much bigger between fire breaks.
Okay.
Sometimes you can use that, but again, seeing those fire breaks in a building that's already finished,
You're not going to see 'em.
incredibly different.
So I'm going to pause you for 1 second. We have a couple of questions.
I just wanted to make a comment. If they could put Chief Dempsey's chart back up there for a moment, showing the data. When he brought it up, I thought it was a good point because I thought about myself, a little bit of my time in fire investigations and a little bit of time as a company officer, right? So I think in Montgomery, we commonly see spaces not protected by sprinklers being the closets, the big walk-in closets sometimes, a bathroom. I remember having a fire that occurred in the bathroom and what I would say would have been a fully sprinklered, obviously it wasn't, but a sprinklered building, but there was no sprinkler head in the bathroom, and then the garages. So we see that, I believe, a fair amount in Clarksburg, right, that there are a bunch of those garages that are not sprinklered. And we also see it where there is no sprinkler in the townhouse garage, I think. I think we've had a couple fires. I know I've been a chief officer somewhere, I want to say in 440s area, fire in the garage of a 3-story or 2-story townhouse, but the garage was not sprinklered.
Right. So Montgomery County adopted some changes to the code where for townhouses, they do require sprinklers in the garage, even though the base code does not. And that was pretty much Montgomery County's experience saying, hey, we need to protect these areas. Now, what they did is protecting the garage can become very expensive because the garage is not heated. So Montgomery County said, look, we're going to compromise a little bit. We're going to have you put a head, at the intersection of the residence/garage. That way you don't have to do a special system. And we're going to get, decent coverage. It might not be code compliant coverage because the garage is deeper than the sprinkler can cover. But it was a genius idea of saying, hey, this will cover most of it. Let's at least cover most of it.
So we're relying on the double drywall, the fire doors.
The fire door with the closer, the drywall. As we know, like the most important thing in this equation are those doors closing, whether it be a garden apartment, a bedroom of a single family, the door going to a garage. The difference in what we encounter and have to deal with is markedly different when that door closes.
Yeah, I mean, our last high-rise fire, 2 questions? So our last high-rise fire that we talked about, in Tacoma Park, the door didn't close. Isn't that correct, right, Chief? So that was a feature that affected that building.
Yeah, the Falkenham, the fire in Baltimore County that killed the fireman some 8 years ago now, 9 years ago. That was a door that didn't close.
Yeah, and I still tell people about the pictures with the hollow core doors. Just did a phenomenal job of fire protection. Chief, your questions?
A couple questions. One person asks, where can we go to find summaries of the NFPA 1313R codes, et cetera? Is there a go-to spot that does a good job of explaining those?
There, in the preamble in the codes is a pretty good explanation as to what the intent of the code is, what its purpose is. You can find a lot of those codes available now online for free. At least they do have PDF limited things. They may not let you print it. But if you go to the front of any NFPA code, there is a preamble that says what the code is about, what it's intended to do, and also a little bit of its history.
All right. Second question, maybe kind of a statement, talked about somebody was out doing a fire safety presentation. Yesterday, they encountered a building that had combustible stairways because it was under a certain height. and they said under 5 stories. I don't know, I guess they were in a larger building. So this had a combustible stairway, right? I mean, the stairs were combustible. The walls were not. I guess they were blocked, right? The exterior walls were blocked. I think about it myself now, right? I was in a Holiday Inn over the weekend, Holiday Inn Express, and when I walked on the stairs, they were clearly wooden stairs.
Yeah.
Right?
So the code allows that. The construction code allows that. In this case, you probably had the CMU walls for the stair as much as anything that provides the rigidity to the building. So you'll see a wood building being built, and then you'll notice some of the shafts will be CMU, the stairs, the elevator, and maybe the kitchen exhaust. What that does is that provides the rigidity to the building for pretty much for wind loading, so the building doesn't, want to topple over. One of the differences is in both codes, the stairs get sprinklered every floor when you have a combustible stairway. So that's why you all had sprinklers on the second floor, whereas a non-combustible stair only gets sprinklers at the bottom and the top. And the bottom is more meant to protect, like, underneath the stringers. So it's fairly common. The name of the game is to build it in the industry, is to build it as cheap as possible to maximize your profits. And because of that, they're going to take every advantage of the codes to make that happen.
So what kind of things, other than getting in and walking through and knowing where our heads are at and our standpipe connections, if so equipped, what types of things can we do to make our actions better, more effective?
So getting, I mean, honestly, this is a case where the fire alarm did exactly what it was supposed to do. We weren't there at 4 o'clock in the morning wondering why this thing was going off and kind of upset. Did exactly what it was supposed to do. I had gotten into a bad habit of not getting dressed, and my guys would get dressed on the squad, and I wouldn't get dressed. We got a building we run like 5 times a week. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden one day I looked, and I'm up on the 8th floor of this building, and my guys are dressed, and I'm not. And I'm like, well, this is pretty stupid. And, I think we have an obligation to the community to get dressed and be ready. Even if it's a building we've run time and again. This same building that we run all the time that we've gotten complacent on, it was only like 5 years ago that we had a 2-alarm fire. The units were dispatched for an automatic alarm. A squad got on the scene, looked up, and said, gee, that thing's like on fire.
That's the reason the alarm's going on.
That's the reason the alarm's going on. So, I think that's part of it. It's also important, again, we got to know our environment. People move around all the time. Now, the good thing is the masters move around a lot less than the officers. That's what it appears.
Generally, yeah.
The masters tend to stay. They can be a great resource of knowledge.
Yeah. And that's why I like to highlight that with Aaron. Yeah. I mean, all of his information came from the guy that drove him there.
Yep.
It's not, I work a lot of overtime, and I'm going to places where, you go to Tacoma Park as a detailed officer, you got 25 or 40 seconds to read a map. It's just, you don't have a lot of time. So, are there any general rules of thumbs about when these buildings are built as big as they are? Like, they ran a 600-foot attack line.
Yeah.
I don't want to say is that common. I don't at all. But would I have to put an 800-foot attack line in service in a building? Or would code just say, look, it's just too far?
So the code does have the ability for potentially the authority having jurisdiction to say, okay, no matter what the height is, we got to do something. But, it's fairly rare that gets applied. One place you would find it is a mall, a shopping.
Oh, yeah.
A mall. I inspected a new elementary school today over in Prince George's County. It's a very large elementary school, much bigger than you would anticipate an elementary school to be. There are no standpipes. Depending on where you pull up outside, you could easily have 600 feet plus, and at that point you really got to start thinking about a leader line.
Certainly.
a 3-inch leader line that you can feed 2 attack hoses off of. But
nothing prohibits it.
Nothing prohibits
So
it.
we could have a 800-foot deep building, potentially.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And one of the areas that I do a lot of work in are warehouses, and the warehouses have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. There are some now requirements in the code that if it's greater than 400 feet from any point outside access point, you got to provide something. But the something they're providing, we're never going to find and use, which would be you got to have a valve by each door leading in, but finding that valve may not be so easy if it's smoky and everything.
Valve meaning like a
It's a fire hose valve that comes off the system and would allow you to at least be to a more manageable, theoretically, 400 feet.
distance.
But remember that 400 feet is all based on making the right turns. If this building had been a little bit more complicated and you had had a couple decision trees to make, you could have easily made the wrong turn and 600 feet wouldn't have done it.
So in a standpiped building, what's the code, Montgomery County code, between connections?
So it's based on means of egress, which is typically 250 feet. There is the ability that if it's more than 200 feet, that they can apply and say you got to have intermediate standpipes. But the trouble with the intermediate standpipes is unless you've been in that building, you're not going to find them. And an intermediate standpipe, we're going to be using the connection on the fire floor because there's no stair right there.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when we're in a stair, we typically try to connect one floor below, give us a little more protection. That intermediate standpipe doesn't have a stair. So you're going to have to find it in the smoke. You're going to have to connect to it. You're not going to be protected. So, their usefulness is somewhat limited. It checks a box and it meets the code, but it's not super friendly to us.
So really, honestly, be prepared for multiple companies accomplishing a single task.
Yeah.
Right? And you guys encountered that even with, how long was it?
Yeah, it was about 600.
So even at a 600-foot attack line, hey, we need more than one company even to accomplish that task.
And of course, along the way, we have studies that have shown that the manpower makes all the difference.
Certainly.
Us having four-person engine companies makes a huge difference. 5 would be better. New York City, 6. But our special services are typically running with 3. So all these things, happen, and again, it's a time factor, and time is, again, fire growth.
Mm-hmm. So, Chief, thank you very much.
Sure.
Questions, Chief Davis?
No, I'm working on trying to get a photo up from a fire that happened out west. So keep going, though.
Okay.
I do want to note that. So I was part of the incident command team on this fire, and coming from Battalion 1 headquarters, right? I left when Lieutenant called for the box alarm. Normally, by the time I travel this far, they have a hose line in place, right? And pulled in, and Chief Ryman and I were in a command post together, and they're still, right, they were still building that attack line. And so that let us know that, hey, wow, right, something's a little different about this one. And from our vantage point, this was a huge building. You would not have known there was a fire in the building because you couldn't see any smoke from where we were located, other than people leaving and people saying that there was a problem. No. So, right, that 2 companies were assigned to build attack lines, 2 to build the first, 2 to build the backup is what we ended up doing on that. So we had staffing, right? And kudos to the driver getting started on all that.
So I have a question for you then, Chief Davis. What kind of... So you don't see anything from your vantage point. From the command post, you see nothing other than a large new building that is loosely being evacuated, correct?
Right.
So the communication then becomes a vital component between you and the company officers. Was there anything that was said that helped that or hindered that from you or Chief Ryman's perspective? I don't know if you've talked about it or not, but just to kind of put you on the spot, what could either of these guys said to help you out? Or did they say
Well,
anything that you said, man, that
this
just
brings
doesn't
up
make
a
sense?
good point, right? You commonly talk about having your regular driver. I commonly talk about having my regular officers, right? So Lieutenant Travers is a regular officer, right? So I'm gonna listen to him. He knows how I work. I know how he works. Lieutenant Hykes, well, he's a detail guy. I know some about how he operates, but so Travers is going to be the one I trust until I get some more folks there. In fact, I had a bunch of mutual aid companies, right? And so I actually assigned Captain Barcinas, who came on the RID, and say, look, you're going to have to go help me sort out on that second floor what kind of problem I got, because there's a lot of people saying they need rescued. Captain Barcinas, my regular guy, come to the command post. Your job, take your company, go to that second floor. You figure out how big of a problem I got with rescues. Call me on talk around, right? That's what we did.
So that consistency is, you're looking for it just like I'm looking for it.
Yeah, I think all the chief officers are going to say the same thing, right? It's just like myself working with Chief Dempsey back and forth. He shows up on the fireground. There are times when I'm like, hey, I need you to go take a look at this, come back, to call me on talk around. This is what I'm looking for. Help me out here, right? And vice versa.
Okay. So, Aaron, we're going to start with you. What have you changed anything? Have you ever been to a fire like this before? In a building like this? Is this
Not where it's, switching switching gears from, hey, this is, another routine fire alarm to, oh, hey, we're going to work.
okay? And have you changed anything that you do
Yeah.
based on what is that?
So, like I said early on, when I heard Ryan say fill the box, I kind of just took off. I broke crew integrity. I didn't have accountability for my people. So it's basically from that fire on, I make sure those guys are, in my hip pocket, or at least, keep
And that's hard to
pace
do on a ladder truck, right? You have your driver
yeah.
generally working all by himself.
Right.
May or may not be doing what you think.
And
he or
I've
she
started
is
communicating a little bit better of, like even riding the engine company, meet me here. Do not leave this point. I'm going to go do a 360 and come back. Before I would just go do my thing and expect them to know exactly what I was thinking, what I was doing.
Yeah.
So my communication's gotten a lot better on that.
Good.
Other than that, I mean,
So I wonder, let's take this same incident, and it's 4 o'clock in the morning, a little bit more delay getting out. Do you think it'd be a little bit different outcome, or about the same?
I think we would have the issue of the residents, don't you? I mean,
I think the residents, ultimately
Because-
where that was set up, I don't think there'd be a whole lot of change.
Okay.
well, I think
I mean, we go out of here, speaking company 15, I'll call it, goes out of here the same way, I think, in that middle of the night call as it is going to be in the afternoon. And specifically where that was for the issue with residents and smoke travel and that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
I think we'd have.
I do the same. I'm just grumpier at 3 in the morning.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, that's also valid. But
I mean, everybody was either awake or not in the building at that time. Till you change that to 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
Now people are going to try to use that stairwell that's on fire, or
Yeah.
they're not going to leave because it's 3 in the morning, and I don't want to get out of bed either when a fire alarm goes off.
true.
So can I ask the same question to you, Ryan? What have you been to this fire? No, question one: been to this fire before?
I don't think so. I mean, Randy's, I think the only one that was significant was the one that they ran similar to donut construction down in College Park a handful of years. I think I
Burlington
ran from
Road or
25, yeah. But same thing, similar setup as far as construction-wise. But other than that, probably not from like Aaron said, from a fire alarm to
Okay. So
something
what
fire
have you changed being a float lieutenant?
I think communication is always a real big thing.
Okay. Do you think you did a good
I'm
job?
very
here?
fortunate to be parked here now with working with some of the same group of guys. But again, I think that can always be better to say, hey, instead of let's get this line in place, hey, this is what I was thinking. My initial thing was, hey, we have the hydrant and connections on the alpha side, and, Brett transitioned to a different hydrant that I didn't know about that, he ran the line around the back and that kind of thing. So again, what I was thinking, what it turned out to be.
Did that, and I think his actions were probably the right actions, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I
he's
think
probably
everything-
more familiar than you are. But
Yep.
Did that
I just
throw
mean
you for
those.
a loop?
Not really, just for the fact of that once I found out where they were, but it was just more or less, hey, we're going to build this attack line out now via the outside, not via the inside.
Okay.
And it really just kind of changed some minor things. But again, it was just communication. I think it can always be more concise.
So
to
have you
say,
changed
hey,
your communications?
I try to on a regular basis to make sure that,
So little
everybody, yeah, I mean, that way no matter who you're riding with, they know what your expectations are or what you're thinking or.
So you
know,
go
for
to
the most
24
part.
tomorrow or 16 or whatever, the regular lieutenant comes back. You're not going to have a different conversation with the shift or the crews or.
I mean, again, I think as far as we'll call it the officer of the engine company, hey, look, we're going to put an attack line here. This is the attack line that I was thinking. And unless I'm told different by, one of the individuals from that company that says, hey, look, that attack line doesn't work here or what have you. I think the same conversation. The attack line needs to go here. This is where I'm going to be. This is where I'm heading. I'll meet you back here or whatever.
Okay.
But I think the conversation's big. But
Yeah. No. I agree. Chief, you have anything that you want to add before we go?
No,
I can ask you if you've been to a fire like this.
I have. I have. It's funny, the College Park fire that you talk about is the largest lost fire in Prince George's County's history. And the big problem was the sprinklers were not on yet. If the sprinklers had been on, even though it wasn't occupied, that would have been a markedly different outcome. But that's the largest lost fire in their history, and they're building them. There's like 4 of those same buildings being built right now in that area. And, of course, we're building them left and right.
Certainly we are.
And,
I think
and
that's to do with the dollar, like you said.
and the reason they get built is because they maximize the use of the land, and the land is incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
And that's why they're building them.
Well, guys, thank you very much for coming and sharing your story. I appreciate your guys' willingness to do this and certainly the expertise that you bring to the table, Chief. As a reminder, our next Boss Talk will be June 16th. We'll be doing it at the Training Academy. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of revisit the whole float lieutenant position. We did it once in the past. We did it early in the series. We got a lot of really good feedback. The organization really hasn't changed at all, but I want to revisit that. I want to talk again about some technology things that have come into play. Simple things like MDCs, how are we using them? How are we figuring all of those things out? So it will be an episode that will feature a couple of float lieutenants and really a roundtable discussion. So until then, everybody be safe and thank you.